Welcome to the Wren's Nest in Atlanta's historic West End neighborhood. The Wren's Nest was the home of Joel Chandler Harris, the author of the Uncle Remus stories and an editor for the Atlanta Constitution. The house originally was a small farmhouse built in 1870 for the Muse family. They remodeled it in 1875 to the configuration that you see in this photograph. The Harris family moved into the house in 1881. They were renting it. They bought it in 1883 and immediately started remodeling it in 1884 with the help of architect George Humphreys. They added a second story to the house, some rooms, and the wraparound porch that gives it the classic Queen Anne look. There was another remodeling that took place at the house in 1900. Harris stayed in the house until his death in 1908. The family left in 1913, which makes this a very remarkable structure in that it's right at 150 years old, but it was only a residence for 43 years and a house museum for over 100 years. So when you walk into the house, you're seeing it, a lot of it, as the Harris family would have seen it and recognize it. You don't, no rooms have changed dramatically, walls haven't been torn out. So it's a unique experience as far as house museums go, and I thoroughly encourage you to visit it whenever you're in Atlanta. The room I'm going to be working in is on the back of the house. It's a bedroom, and it was known as the mother's room. And it was occupied by Harris's mother and his wife. The entrance door is on the right there. That's coming in off the central hallway. The door on the left is going into a very small closet. Adjacent to the door, that closet door on the right, is where the original fireplace was located. I've put a yellow line on the floor, and that yellow line indicates the position or location of an exterior wall up until 1900. So the original bedroom that the two women occupied was only 10 feet deep, and it was 17 feet wide, which gives you 170 square feet for two adults. If we pivot around and look at the room from the doorway coming into it, we'll put the yellow line back down, and that's the location of the original exterior wall. The room was expanded in 1900 to include that extension there. All in all, it was not a large bedroom. The floors in the mother's bedroom were unique for two reasons. First, they had never, ever been sanded, which led to the second reason, and that is that everything that had ever been put on those floors was still there, unless it had been worn off by foot traffic. And that included a variety of paints and drying oils that had accumulated over 150 years. And as you can see here in the doorway coming in off the central hall, everything has been worn off and we're down to bare wood. As we look and pan around the room on my initial walk, I found something that caught my attention, and the camera's moving in on it. And as we get closer, we can see that it is a piece of a linoleum rug that was stapled to the floor. I removed it, and it's now in the archives for the Wren's Nest, and then you can see it measures about 4.5 inches long by about 1.5 inches wide. Painted floors can be problematic to restore, so you want to make sure that you choose a representative spot when you do your testing and sampling. I found a good one and put the tape down and then followed that with the chemical, and as you can see, I got very good results. We got through the paint and down to the bare wood. What's important about this testing process is that you often get a good idea of the sequence of how the materials were applied. You can easily see that around the perimeter of the room there was a drying oil that was put down first. It's the darker material. Then on top of the drying oil went the mustard colored paint, and that's just around the perimeter. And then finally the last application was a maroon paint that went down over the entire floor. The test results were good, so it's time to start the coatings removal process. I do this with safe, environmentally responsible, biodegradable chemicals. The process I use is called Passive Refinishing. I developed it over 30 years ago and I've been using it very successfully on a lot of different projects. The last application of paint was the maroon paint, so it's the first to come off. And as we get it off, you can see the mustard colored paint underneath. In many areas it was totally intact and had not worn off like it had in other areas. I typically work in strips, and you can see the wet chemical on the floor, and you can see the paint being lifted off of the surface, and wood is seeing the light of day for the first time in over 100 years. It's kind of a fun part of the process. And there you can see the pine peeking through. We always like to take a section and cover it and protect it so that future generations will get to see what was on the floor before the restoration process. This is called the witness, and this is the witness on the exterior wall. Now that all the surface accumulations are gone, it's time to start interpreting what we're looking at, letting the floor tell its story. In the lower left-hand corner there you see a very dark spot. That is most likely some type of chemical burn of unknown origin. But you're also seeing around the perimeter of the room a noticeably darker area. Let's go back and look at this photograph. I bracketed the middle section of the floor because in that area the maroon paint was very much intact. And one of the reasons it was is because I didn't see any drying oil underneath the maroon paint before I took it off. Once I got it off, you can see how much lighter it is compared to the perimeter around the exterior of that yellow line. And that means that there were repeated applications of the drying oil being applied to the floor. We reverse the field and you still see that same pattern of a darker shadow around the center section. Here's another view, and now you're seeing a very clear, well-defined line, and this is up toward where the hearth, that's the hearth, the red line represents the heart of the old fireplace. This would have been a major traffic area in the bedroom up until 1900, and as the old drying oils got worn off, more would have been applied. And so you just had repeated applications, and we change our point of view here, and you can still see that very clear line, and that's an indication of just repeated applications of the drying oil that saturated the wood. Let's now turn our attention to a seam in the floor that represents where the old wood from the 1875 original farmhouse meets the wood from 1900 remodeling. I've labeled them so you can see them very clearly here. And you will notice that the wood from 1875 is wider. It's actually 5 inches in width and was a very good grade of pine flooring. The newer wood that dates to 1900 was around 3 3/8 of an inch, which is very typical of that time period. What really fascinated me about this seam, the way the wood was fitted up against each other, was how they had to take into account the variations in width and to hand cut and fit the pieces to make for a nice, smooth joint. Remember that there were probably not power tools around, so this is all done by hand, which, I don't know, really fascinates a person like myself. Barbara Black, our architect, is holding a small fastener that we found in the floor. This is very typical of that era. These fasteners were typically used to nail down area rugs, linoleum rugs, or floor cloths. If you look right below that yellow line, you can see in the old 1875 floor that something was tacked down right up against the exterior wall. Let's now turn our attention to an area just inside the room. It was behind the entrance door coming in off the central hallway. That's the entrance door on the right there. And you notice a rectangular pattern up against the wall that is significantly lighter than the area in front of it. My hunch, or my guess, is that there was a piece of furniture there, probably an armoire or a chifforobe or possibly even built-in shelving, because you had 2 adult women sharing a small bedroom, and they had 1 small closet. So the darkness was created by the repeated applications of the drying oil. At some point in time, the piece of furniture was removed because we found paint there, but no drying oil underneath, suggesting that all of that happened probably very early in the life of the room. The next story has to do with a product that was left on the floor that we didn't remove. We're moving the camera. The camera is zooming in on a doorway that leads into a very small closet. When I opened the closet door and I looked inside, it dawned on me that I was probably looking at the original drying oil that the Harrises and everybody else had been applying around the perimeter of that bedroom for years. As you look at it, you will see that it is not a very attractive product. It does not, the drying oils don't age well. They trap dirt, they get very dark with age, and like I said, it's just not a very attractive look in a wood floor. They also do not wear well. In this photograph, you can see where the pattern, the wear pattern, just as you enter the closet, it just wore away very quickly. But this is probably the oldest finish in the house. Now, imagine that this is around the perimeter of the bedroom, and at some point in time, somebody probably said, you know, I'm kind of done with this look. I think it's time we paint it. And that's exactly what they did. And that's where those applications of paint started. Our final story is on the witness that we created in the room. It's up against the exterior wall, and you cover a section of the floor so that you can preserve and protect what was on there before the restoration work started. This gives future generations an appreciation for just the amount of effort that went into restoring the floor. They get to see the maroon paint, the mustard paint, and where it's chipped up a little bit, they can see the drying oil underneath it. It's a good way of educating people about just what restoration work is involved with and what it can accomplish. I hope you've enjoyed the story Floor at the Wren's Nest. I certainly have enjoyed presenting it to you. The floor itself was very typical of floors of the late 19th and early 20th century. You had the constant struggle with homeowners trying to make a room presentable, putting down floor cloths or linoleum rugs in the center section and then working around the perimeter either with the drying oils or paints was quite common. And it's fascinating to present this to people in the 21st century and give them a taste of what life was like at that time. Anyway, I enjoyed the work and enjoyed meeting all the people with the Wren's Nest. I hope that you will put the Wren's Nest on your itinerary when you come to Atlanta because it is a treasure, an absolute treasure. Before I leave, I do want to acknowledge the generosity of Carl and Sally Gables of the Gables Foundation. It was a grant from their foundation that funded the restoration of the mother's bedroom. Thank you very much for all you have done for the Wren's Nest and the city of Atlanta. Take care.